Welcome one and all, it's time for a Deadzone tournament report, and it has been a while since this spicy sci-fi extravaganza was up and running in a tournament sense. Of course, I had to get a piece of that sizzling action, and a piece of that sizzling action that I was able to get was Ringworld 5, tournament that took place at Mantic Games HQ, put on by VC Games, and let's dive straight in, shall we? Get rid of that thumbnail. Beautiful as it is. See here. So this is the picture of the first scenario, but before that, I'll tell you exactly what I've got in my list. So, first round is 150 points, and the following 3 rounds are 200 points. And within that, I have chosen 2 very similar lists. In fact, they're almost the same with stuff added to the bigger list. So let's have a look at the 150 points first, which you can see here. So I've gone with a general, stage 3A general, which is the one that can mutate the deceased enemies into zombies with a splat. Got 3 hellhounds. We've got 1 plague teraton, we've got 2 plague swarms, we've got a ghoul, and I think this one has a smoke grenade, which I just had a tiny amount of points left over, so I thought why not throw it on somebody, could be useful. We've got the plague mortar, we've got 2 zombies in there as well, so that is 150 points. And I've managed to squeeze in quite a few gribbly things at that point level. And at the 200 point level, the changes mainly are a slight rejigging of the number of dogs and zombies, and then we also bring in the aberration. And is there much else different here? Just having another look now to remind myself. Higher point level. I don't think there is a great deal of difference other than slight deviation with the number of dogs, zombies, oh, an HMG as well. So the HMG comes in at the higher point level as well, in addition to the aberration, who you will have seen in the thumbnail. So, game 1, patrol. And in this one, you can see that there are 2 2-point objectives towards the middle of the table there, 1-point objectives in the corners. This is the first 3rd edition tournament I've attended, by the way, or Deadzone, and I haven't actually played that many games off 3rd edition full stop, so we'll see how this goes. Corner deployment with a bit of a twist, doesn't quite poke out as far that way. There's a lot of variation in the scenarios in the rulebook now, which leads to some very interesting deployment setups. So let's look at who I'm facing in this round. So it's also Plague with a general, but slightly different. No big gribbly things, all there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dogs, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 zombies. I believe all of those are in the full list. I don't think any of those zombies are in reserve to be resurrected. I think that is the entire list there. So that is a lot of garbage, which I'm hopeful that things like plague swarms will just gobble up easily. Because dogs, really, they're not that great, but if you can get them into something that's not particularly good at fighting, they've got the speed to chase them down. But I don't really have a lot that falls into that category. My big stuff that's going to be doing most of the fighting will eat them quite handily. Our dogs probably don't want to get outnumbered by 1 million enemy dogs, and if you let the zombies pile up on you, obviously it can be bad news as well. Got Dino Titan Edition in the chat there. Hello. Next, we've got the deployment. So I won the recon test, and that meant I was able to advance my Teraton forward a bit, I believe. Got everyone else just where they can fit. The mortar hiding right in the corner. Not that it makes a big difference in this game anyway, because no one's going to be able to shoot it, but it might as well be as far away from the enemy as possible and in a position where they don't want to be because there are no objectives there. So, my opponent's deployment is even more of a mess because just look how many models there are. They can barely fit within the zone, I think. And the command dice for the first turn. My opponent has some extra dice, and movement and shoot. I've got movement, shoot. So for the first turn, you probably don't really care about getting fight dice. I would prefer to have more move dice in the first turn if I want to actually close in on my opponent, which I will do. And there's the setup, so you can see an objective there, there's one there. If I can land some big, tasty creatures onto these objectives, I'll be hopeful that they just won't get shifted for the whole game. And I'm going first, so I choose to start mortaring while the enemy still has all their models bunched up. And I kill a couple of zombies, which doesn't get me any victory points, but it's just starting to thin the herd down a bit. And the Teraton jumps up onto this bridge before any enemies can get there. If the enemy could have put multiple zombies up there, for example, they actually become quite difficult to beat in a fight. But as long as you occupy the cube and the zombies just start piling in, one by one, if you've got something decent in there, you should be able to take them out. So that is the plan. Teraton just sit on the objective the whole game, and it's very unlikely that anything's going to kill him. I've got my plague swarms moving up. Nothing can actually reach that one yet. That one could end up being quite heavily contested. My swarms, who are way more vulnerable to shooting than they are to close combat, they're happy to face a list that's going to be trying to fight me up close and personal. And the other one making its way down there, you can see this enemy dog here. And there's not much I can do about the 10 dogs that are running around the place, so I'm just going to have to bunch up on the objectives and kill whatever comes near that. We end up with a bit of a dog off here, where we're kind of trading dogs for a little bit, but eventually they stop dying and just start piling up in the cube with the objective, which is okay. My opponent is okay with that, because it means that the very slow horde of zombies can make their way up. I'm okay with that because it means that my big gribblies will be able to pile in there and win that area for me. I've lost a dog as a result of that fight, and so did my opponent. And one of his dogs decides to just sit on the 1 point objective, which I'm cool with. I'm not going to bother chasing it. I'm going to concentrate all my effort here, and use the swarms to just hunt down, preferably enemy dogs. They're actually worth a victory point. So if I can get the swarms to kill a couple of dogs in a turn, that is a valuable use of their time. And if anyone goes for that objective, I've got the swarm here ready to go after them. Teraton isn't going to get shifted. I'm quite happy with this area as well. So I've got a slight lead after that first round by way of holding this objective. A small amount of kills that were outside. So obviously I put them down as evil plague because my plague are clearly the goodies. Second round, my opponent does have a splat, so could be creating a zombie potentially in this round. We'll see. I've got lots of movement, which is handy for things like plague swarms. They're not the fastest. That's a nice feature. It also means that there's a potential for initiating more combats as well. Move into another cube that has models in it after. So, mortar, what do we do in this round? Knock down some dogs. I don't think it kills anything, this drops them down. So they're going to be easier to mop up now. Plague Swarm piles in there and kills a dog. I've got the advantage here now. Well, but there is still that enemy dog there. So we're piling up the casualties, but there's still tons of them left. This Plague Swarm, I think, kills a dog as well. May even kill both of them this round. Yep, they're piling up. But the zombies are going to start coming in. Now you can see the zombies get in there one by one. And if one of them doesn't die, suddenly it becomes difficult because they not only get a bonus for having a friend in there, they also get the horde bonus for having multiple zombies. So the Plague Swarm is kind of up against it to chew through them all here once they start racking up those bonuses for having more in there. You have to kill them as they come in, otherwise you'll struggle. Dog on objective. Can't do much about that right now, but I'm going to deal with it next turn, hopefully. At the end of that round, I increase my lead a little bit by being on a juicy 2 point objective and killing quite a lot of dogs in that round. So with this point level, it's first to 16 victory points. So not quite there yet. So how many do I need now? I'm up to 10 and my opponent's up to 6. So it's a decent advantage, and if I can kill a few dogs in this round, then I've got a good chance to actually end the game here. So the zombies are piling up. See, they've wounded the Plague Swarm now, so they're going to have mega bonuses on it. So my opponent's probably going to claim that one. But at this point, I'm not overly concerned as long as I just hold some of the objective. Plague Swarm dies. I've got a big enough lead at this point though, so I just need to keep this one, and nobody's clearing out that Teraton, and then hunt down some dogs, ideally. I think how many have I killed? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is that? So there may be a couple more. There's one here, and there was one on that objective, but I think that one's left so that the general could sit on that objective. So at the end of that round, I get another 4 points. So I'm very close now. My opponent got another 5, so isn't too far off, but needs quite a few more than I do. So at this stage, let's see. Okay, so there is no final picture because I think I forgot to take a picture of the notebook in that round. So I've got it right here though. So let's see. At the end of that round, so what happened was, I can describe it from the pictures here. So my opponent did have a dog. It was down here beside the steps, and I forgot it existed because it was behind the stairs. So my leader was casually just chilling out round here, thinking that it was safe, and my leader actually ended up getting eaten by a dog because I just forgot that the dog existed. That gave my opponent some victory points. I obviously held this one. This one looks like it ended up contesting. Make a difference. I was always going to reach 16 points in this round anyway. I actually ended up on 17 points. But because my opponent was able to kill my leader, that put my opponent on 16 points as well, which turned it into a draw. So had I remembered there was a dog behind the stairs, I could have just moved my leader over this way and made it completely safe and probably guaranteed the win. But as it is, it's a draw. So the way the scoring works in this tournament, it's 0 for a loss, 5 for a draw, 10 for a win, followed by bonuses for the amount of victory points you scored in the game. So if you get 16 or more, you get the plus 10 bonus. So if you win the game, probably looking at a score of 20, and then your victory points are kept track of just for tie-breaking purposes. So not bad, decent start, quite happy with how the list performed there. The game plan went pretty much as I intended, just that one little blunder there, forgetting the dog existed, which is never a good idea. I'm not sure what's worse, forgetting an enemy model's there, or forgetting one of your own models exists and then finding out when you're packing up at the end of the game, which has happened many a time. Scenario 2, divide and conquer. So this is the kind of thing that potentially is good for me. In my 200 point list, I've got the Aberration, I've got a Teraton, I've got 2 Plague Swarms. Big things that can control an area. So depending on what I'm up against, then they can land somewhere, and if the enemy don't want to engage, I can just rack up victory points until I die. So here is my setup. I've got an HMG on the roof, I've got a mortar down there, blood dogs there, swarm. The Aberration moves forwards, I think, because if you look at the deployment, oh, actually it starts there, because I get the 2 front cubes as well. And I can't remember who won the recon role in this one, but there's my opponent's setup. So, very similar list actually to mine, because mine has, can't even see all of it, but it's pretty much the same, but with the Aberration and an extra dog and an HMG, I think. My opponent has a mortar, a plague swarm, leaper, a few dogs, so yes, this is plague again that I'm facing, Teraton. I think I think that's the mortar, and that's the Aberration there. There's the Plague Lord, big, scary, ultimate, very slow thing. And yes, very evenly matched lists. However, what I will say about this, there is a 2-point objective there, which is on a half cube, which says to me that my Plague Swarm superiority, I've got 2, going to pay dividends there, because the Leaper really does not want to be fighting Plague Swarms. That's a really bad use of his time. So I can have a bit of a monopoly on that one, and if I send the Aberration over onto this one, if I can get there first, then the enemy might have trouble shifting it. They can't gang up on it. Plague Lord and the Aberration, they're pretty damn tough to kill even for each other. So, see how this goes. My opponent is rolling more command dice because the Plague Lord allows more. Jazz Naz says, don't forget to like the video. Yes, that's an excellent idea. If you're not liking the video, what are you even doing with your life right now? So lots of move dice for my opponent. I've got one and I've got lots of extra shoots, which is useful for suppressing models. Because when they're HMGs, they really want to be able to shoot Teratons to stop them teleporting. That's the dream. If you've got a Teraton, you just want to be invisible until you teleport, because you don't want anyone getting a free suppression on you. Bad news. So, got my aberration onto the objective there. There is an enemy up there. Looks like a dog. Got my dog here. Teraton gets suppressed immediately, as you'd expect. It may have been from the mortar, or yeah, I think it probably was. And yes, not ideal start for a Teraton, but it can still start creeping forwards. I suppress the enemy Teraton though in retaliation, so they will struggle to get teleports off in this game. Let's see. Ben says Plague Lord loses versus Aberration if the Aberration charges in. The Smash special rule makes it Sork. Yes, the Smash special rule is very, very tasty. The Plague Lord often doesn't dictate who he fights. The Smash rule does make the Aberration a bit more reliable at killing things now. But still, they are really, really tough critters, the Plague Lord and the Aberration. They ideally would want to be just mowing through things worse than each other, I would say, in an ideal world. You can see here lots of models being suppressed. I do get my Plague Swarm onto the 2-point objective there, which, as you'd expect, murdered the dog that was up there quite handily. And then we've got a bit of a dog war down on this side. On the other side, the picture is actually reversed here. So this is actually on the left-hand side, as normally pictures. Dog each in there contesting that one. And I do lose dog in that duel though. So what I've noticed so far is that my opponent is focusing a lot of big stuff over in this direction, while only being able to claim one of the objectives with big stuff, because this one's on a half cube. So the Leaper is the only thing that can get up there. Everyone else is just going to have to sit underneath and try and uppercut the Plague Swarm, where they don't get quite as many dice as they would do if they were moving in there fighting it. And they're not going to be able to go up there to claim the objective themselves. So I think they would have been better off moving over to the other side and monopolising all the points over there with the big Gribblies. I've got swarms heading in that direction. The Teraton is very slowly making its way over there. So I think I've got a decent chance at claiming both sides at the moment, the way this is looking. I've got a ghoul there looking out the window. And what does he actually do? Does he accomplish anything? I don't know. I think actually, yes, I remember. The mortar was turned backwards here because I used rapid fire on it and just suppressed it. So that's going to make it more difficult for it to shoot now. And if it does want to shoot, it'll have to use a shoot dice. And the Leaper does attempt to take down the Plague Swarm out of desperation, being the only thing that could fit up there, but was eaten horribly, as you can expect. So it's looking quite good at the moment. I've got a monopoly on these two objectives. This one's looking fairly secure. The Plague Lord's in the middle of nowhere. And I've been dishing out a lot of suppression. 5-1 up at the moment. Not a lot of killing, but in a good position. My opponent has a bit of a variety of command dice there. No shooting or fighting though. I've got lots of extra activations this time. So that means that hopefully I will be able to go first in the next round by using those to use up my activations faster. So we've got an Aberration War going on in there now, as you can see, which quite often is a pillow fight. They're very, very tough nut to crack, both of them. And obviously you have to do more damage than usual when dealing with tough enemies. One thing we totally forgot though is that they can knock each other back in there. Would have been interesting, would have made the fight a bit more interesting, but we did forget about that, so a bit of a pillow fight going on there. And also, it's worth noting that when you have the Plague Lord, you also get the mutation splat that allows you to boost one of the stats. So you could give an extra bit of frenzy to something like an Aberration, which makes it possibly have the edge over fighting something very similar to itself. But in this instance, it didn't. So, Teraton again being suppressed, as you expect. That fight, nothing going on there. Plague Swarm just happily chilling out, nothing really to worry it. And at the end of that round, racking up way more points. You have to get up to 20 at 200 points to win. I'm already up to 14 and my opponent's stuck on 1. Because I'm holding this objective. I'm holding probably the 2 on that side as well. Got dogs and zombies around here. It's just looking quite healthy right now. Yeah, you can see I've got that one with the dog. This one's got a Plague Swarm off going on in it. So I didn't have that one. I had that one and that one. My opponent's not holding any because they're both contested. And then I did a fair bit of killing in that round as well. So it's looking healthy right now. Very healthy indeed. I've got quite good control going on. The Plague Lord still isn't into combat. There's nowhere for him to go and fight apart from that zombie. Can't pile into this cube. Now, if we remembered to use knockback, suddenly it becomes a lot more feasible for him to be here. Because if that Aberration were to win a combat, which it hasn't done yet for the record, then it'd be able to knock back mine into another cube, and then maybe the Plague Lord could head in there and get on those circumstances. But probably not the best use of a Plague Lord, chasing after big, gribbly monsters like this. Be much more suited to taking down a Plague Swarm. One of the few things in the game that Plague Swarms would probably be a little bit afraid of in a fight. And variety of command dice map there, a bit of everything. I've got mostly shoot, which is fine, because I'm going to be able to suppress some more things. And there's no real threat to a lot of my shooting stuff as well. So, as you can see, my Teraton's got in here now to just lock down this cube and that objective. And, yep, it's going very well indeed. Not a lot of action in that turn. So, I've been chasing down enemies with my dog there. Plague Swarm still untroubled. The Plague Lord failed to kill a zombie. He realised that the one thing he could actually do was jump up there and kill the zombie, but failed somehow to murder a zombie in combat. Wow, wow, wow. How embarrassing for Mr. Plague Lord. The Aberrations still can't hurt each other for the moment. And I'm very close to winning now. I just need another point. My opponent barely has anything there on the scoreboard yet. And extra activation dice there for my opponent. I've got a lot of extra fights, which might be useful at the moment. All I have to do really is kill one thing or hold one objective at the end of the turn, and it's basically mine. So the Teraton manages to get suppressed and wounded. Plague Swarms are slugging it out there. I think there are actual slugs in there. Makes perfect sense. My leader did end up getting chased down and killed by a Teraton, which is somewhat difficult to avoid because they are pretty fast. That's going to be some victory points. The Plague Lord up there, you can see that he's been suppressed. I believe I shot him with the mortar. And not much more to report on that turn. This is still a pillow fight between the two Aberrations. Plague Swarms can't finish each other, so just the objective points I think for that round for this one. Teraton was able to just get up and walk back onto the objective. So there you go, big win, tasty win. And took some pictures of the factions that were laid out during the lunch break. So there's mine, of course. The Plague. Got some Forge Fathers. Ancestor there. Got some Nameless. Bit of a sea watery theme going on. Pretty interesting. Got some Asterians. Got some more Plague. So these are the Plague that I faced in the first round with the additions that came into the list, the 200 points. So we've got a couple of big bursters right there. Is that the Plague Burster? Someone remind me if that's actually something different now. I don't think the burster's that. Something different, let me know, because I just haven't looked at models I don't own probably in the rules. And I should probably paint some more Deadzone models. But the ones I've got seem to be doing alright for now. Big Lord there. And then some rebs. Always nice to see rebs out there. I don't see any. Oh yeah, there is a Z. There you go. Always nice to see some Z representation. Got some more Asterians by the looks of things there. Very different list to the other one though. And oh, they are bursters. Yes, so they are bursters. I always thought the bursters were a little bit smaller than that. Very big, but very juicy, succulent models, it has to be said. So round 3, Occupy. Now this is the dream, really, isn't it? You can't ask for more than this if you are playing as a plague list with lots of big gribbly things that just want to jump onto the objectives, sit there and not be attacked. On the other hand, what kind of list would I not want to face on this one? Well, anything that's better in combat than I am, then they could just claim the middle and I wouldn't want to fight them. Or anything with ridiculous shooting, so that when I do move on to the centre, they can just blast me away because I'm not chasing after them. Let's see if any of those come true. Well, I'm against the Asterian list, which I'd probably faced Asterians a couple of times, but I've never faced most of the models that I'm coming up against here. So my deployment, I think I'd lose the recon roll, first of all, quite heavily. So you've got to expect, because I was looking at the list for the Asterians, you've got to expect to take some losses when you're coming up against a powerful shooting list. If your whole goal is to charge towards them and punch them in the face, you're going to lose some big models on the way in. I've got enough to take some losses. The 2 Plague Swarms, the Teraton and the Aberration, backed up by all the dogs. That is a really nice, juicy combat force. And if 2 of those could get into combat with the weedy little 1-wound Asterians, then they can just munch through them quite easily. You'd expect any of those 4 models there to be able to potentially take out 2 of them per turn if they're bunched up. So that is the plan. And then had I gone first as well, Mortar would have been really nice to be able to use up fighting against the Asterians, because just doing that 1 wound to them, which you can easily do with the Mortar, would take them out. So there's my setup. There, it's the Asterian setup. There's a gun drone there, a bit of an indirect fire, so it's kind of like a mortar. Guy with a blast weapon around here as well. Blasts models off things, off the cube they're on, without really having to do much of a test. And then there are lots of missile launcher ciphers that are worth 3 victory points each. So I'm thinking, yes, that's a juicy snack. I'm going to get in there and eat all those. But obviously you don't want to get shot by them on the way in very much. All the 2-point objectives are in the centre on the top of this building with a little bit of cover. So it's not too bad. If I can advance with big gribblies and then just jump up here with my dogs and my less powerful, that would be ideal, because then I'm not losing out on the fighting power. Can't remember what the Asterian flat does. I've got lots of movement, lots of extra dice, which is good for the first round. Movement is nice because I want to get forward to crush my opponent, and extra dice is going to be good for adding into the defensive rolls against the shooting. So the mortar immediately gets hit by an indirect shot to stop it shooting, and I don't have a shoot dice, so I'm not going to be able to shoot with it this turn. Mildly annoying, because it would be good at taking down some of those pesky 1-wound enemies. The Aberration's moving its way forward. So the way the board is set up, let's just get a wide shot here. The Aberration can only actually climb up round on the other side of the tower. And obviously my opponent chose sides by winning the recon roll. That's quite annoying. The Aberration is going to have to go round the side on foot. And these walls are quite annoying. There's nowhere to stop on the way up. There's not really much way of ladders. Certain models will struggle. And this bit here isn't a full cube, so the Aberration can't climb up this way. All the way around there. So, I've lost a dog already. Lost a Plague Swarm already to shooting. Isn't ideal, but I don't need everything to reach the enemy, I just need some of it. Plague Swarm up to the top, dog up to the top. Trying to tempt the enemy to come up here to stop me, but more likely they're just going to use the blast weapon to send one of them back down again. And the mortar gets some more shooting on it, some wounds. There's weird time dilation going. One hand still, the other. And a beverage. So, The enemy are pretty much just sitting back, bit of a shooting gallery. The blast weapon knocks the plague swarm off the roof. The dog gets killed, and I'm not going to get any victory points there. My opponent also found some intel, by the way, which because they're using a hacker model, they get double points for it, which is annoying. And all my models are just slowly working their way up, ready to jump onto the objectives and chase down the enemy. Teraton, I can't even remember where it is. I think I might have teleported it under this tower. Somewhere in there that's like an impenetrable area, like under this roof here, where you can actually stand, because there is access from the other side to get under here and through there, but there's no visibility to any of the shooting, so the Teraton is safe in there. So next turn that's going to spring out, murder something, and then hopefully use a move dice or a fight dice to kill something else. So it's in here, so you can see, for example, enemy there, the move dice, I could then move on to that one. The Aberration can actually, next turn with a move dice, climb up and kill this one. So I could wipe out half my opponent's force almost, just with those two the next round. That would be fun, wouldn't it? However, I'm already 8 victory points down because of all the losses I've taken so far. I haven't been able to do anything back, but you have to take that when you're against a shooting list. You just have to get in there, start eating them, and then the tables will turn. So my opponent doesn't get any extra shoot dice, which is perfect, because that's the nightmare. I've got all the extra movement I want and the extra activation that I want to stop me being shot before I get into combat, and also an extra fight dice. That's like the dream right there. So first things first, obviously the mortar gets suppressed again. Why wouldn't you? Then I do manage to get the Teraton and the Aberration exactly where I want them. The Aberration steams in, fails to kill the weediest of enemies. Teraton teleports out, fails to kill the weediest of enemies, and now they're just stuck there, staring at the enemy in full view, ready to get shot. And that is disappointing, because with the dice that I had there available to me, I was hoping... Let's have a look. So, I had a fight dice. I used both my move dice to get them into that position. So I would hope to get in there with the Aberration, eat one, use the fight dice, eat the other. Get the Teraton in there, eat one. That's 3 expensive enemy models down, and I'm right in there behind the enemy lines. The reason that I would want to use the fight dice for the Aberration, because the Teraton is going to be out in the open. So if there's an enemy in that cube, they're not going to get the bonus. They're going to be able to open shot me from up here, but they wouldn't get the... It would be cancelled out by an enemy being within the same cube as well. So that's why I would use the fight dice on the Aberration here. He's already got a bit of cover there. However, we can forget all those crazy plans, because they just failed to kill anything. Just the most woeful attack rolls ever for big grubbly monsters. And then, of course, the Aberration gets blasted off the roof. Nice. And, yeah, the Teraton's being shot to bits as well, despite the negative modifier for having an enemy in there. One of them just moved out of the cube, shot him, without taking any damage, obviously, because for some reason the Teraton and the Aberration can't roll beans in this game. Dog is fighting against this enemy up here. It's got a sword, so it must be good at fighting. Plague Swarm has got back up there again. And we've got a human arm with some hairs clearly visible on it, reaching across the table there. There's a base here which represents a one enemy model, which the opponent did not trust on the top of a tower to stay on its base. So it's removed for the moment. And Plague Swarm dead. Lost most of my dogs. It's not looking good. It should have been looking good after both of these got into combat, but it's not. So I did get some kills, or I've got some points, should I say, because I'm holding this one, and I didn't actually kill anything yet. Don't remember. I must have done, because there's only 2 points going to me here. That one's contested. My opponent's got this one. So, catching up very slowly. I'm going to need to catch up faster than 1 point a turn, though. So, next, as I try to hold in a sneeze momentarily here. And we're back. So, you'll see here that the Teraton and Aberration have been killed. So the Aberration had the opportunity to use it, jumped up. Wouldn't you just love to get the Aberration up here, or the Teraton up here, do some killing? Well, the Teraton got gunned down. The Aberration, of course, failed its rampage test because it had taken 1 damage previously, I think. And Then after that, it was just gunned down again. So the Aberration is dead. Failed to kill anything for the whole game. The Teraton failed to kill anything for the whole game, even though these are the squishiest, juiciest, most succulent morsels they could possibly hope to fight. 1 wound enemies, whose armour they are both bypassing, yet they can't do anything to them. And all my other units are just jumping up onto the tower to get objective points and then being blasted off. So it's not going well here at all. And yeah, it's still looking bad. Not good at all. Getting murdered. There's the enemy model on its base at the end. Not really a lot I can do about this. I'm slowly being whittled down. Not got much left. And that's going to be the end of that one. So I don't think I took a picture of the final score there. But I was able to eventually rack up a few more points, but then obviously I lost the Aberration and the Teraton, and then my opponent jumped on objectives and started murdering everything else. So that was a loss for 11 points to 24. And I don't know what I could have done differently there, really. I weathered the storm, I got my units into position, I got the Teraton into a spot where it couldn't be killed or suppressed, I got it into combat, got the Aberration into combat, and then they both just failed to do any wounds. Then the enemy just gunned them down mercilessly because none of them were dead. And I don't know what the counter to that would be. Some things I could have done differently maybe was not even worry about the objectives at all and just sprint everything as fast as I could towards the enemy, because even dogs are a threat against these. But then again, with the way I was rolling my dice in close combat, would they have been a threat? So yeah, putting all my eggs in the Aberration and Teraton basket, usually a pretty safe bet against things like this, but on this occasion did not pay off, and then everyone else was too far away to affect the big blob of enemies at the back. Round 4. So I'm still quite high in the table at this point. Still doing alright, and if I win this game, there's a good chance of getting a podium spot. So round 4, Deep Strike. So this is a really bizarre deployment with 2 out of alignment strips there. And you only score victory points on your opponent's half of the table, on the 4-point objectives. So they're worth a massive amount, but you can only score on the ones on your opponent's half. You have to push through the enemy to reach them. So here's my setup. I've got Teraton, I've got the HMG right on top of the roof, I've got a mortar down there. My leader is actually under there, but it's just poking through the window so I don't forget she exists. Teraton is actually underneath this inside the building, but I just put him up there so I wouldn't forget. 2 plague swarms on this side, and dogs and zombies all over the place. The objectives, there's one under the mortar, so the mortar is really guarding that, just to stop something weedy like a dog against plague again. Spoiler alert. So to stop something feeble just steaming in there and just taking the 4-point objective, the mortar is on there, and the other one is down here. So the plague swarms are a bit of a guardian force against that. And I'll see how my opponent sets up as well. So you can actually see. You see? I don't know if you can actually. So I won the recon roll, and there's an enemy mortar just behind here. So because of that, I was able to move my Teraton 1 space out here before the game really started, which meant that I was able to jump on the enemy mortar immediately in turn 1, kill it straight away. However, I did forget there's a plague swarm living under here, and a plague swarm is probably a pretty good counter to a Teraton. Got a better fight stat, just a little bit smaller. And there was a dog in there which didn't help the mortar, it just killed it in one go outright, so I'm now going to have supremacy on the mortaring indirectly and the suppression tactics. You can see that there's a leaper down there. So one thing you might notice is this is exactly the same army that I faced in round 2. So occasionally at a tournament you will end up having to play the same person twice. Here. So moving forwards, I don't really have a big plan to get onto the objectives on my opponent's half as it stands at this stage. I'm being kind of defensive. I don't want to commit forwards because my opponent, of course, has an Aberration, Plague Lord. Any of those got a sufficient number of dice and ended up on one of those objectives in my half. I wouldn't fancy my chances fighting against them particularly. So I'm just going to try and suppress everything with the HMG and the mortar, slow them down, keep them in their own half, and then try and dart in there and just kill things when I can. And then hopefully use superior numbers via killing things with blowing them up to be able to sneak through and get on the objectives, because the Aberration probably isn't going to stay up there for the entire game, otherwise it's kind of a waste of points just guarding an objective, not killing anything, when it could be going forward killing and then maybe scoring. So the fact that it's up there still at this stage, quite happy about the fact that it's not heading towards me. The Plague Lord is down here somewhere. There's an HMG there, but it's on lower ground to mine, so I've got the slight edge in that battle. My opponent pops out the Plague Swarm and kills the Teraton that had killed the mortar. They're both worth 3 points, those units that have died there. But I feel the Teraton is more useful in this scenario for jumping around, getting onto objectives. So, didn't work out that great, but I've got rid of the mortar. The Aberration's steaming up there as well. And the enemy Teraton, I think, is under here somewhere, underneath one of these buildings. So I can't move my Plague Swarms forward, because I would be leaving the objective down here open for the enemy Teraton to leap on with a move dice, I think. So, there's the Plague Lord. You can see him poking his head out down there. Creeping everyone forward. I've got lots of dogs and zombies to move. And what's the action here? So what I would like to do is suppress this Plague Swarm and then attack it with the Aberration. Without suppressing it, it had a dog friend in there. I'm not sure if the dog's still there. But with a friend, the Plague Swarm is a pretty decent match. By no means I would absolutely slaughter the Plague Swarm with an Aberration in one go, but if you can suppress the Plague Swarm and get it surviving only on 5+, then it's pretty weedy, really, against something like this. So that's the ideal situation. You want to suppress it and then go after it with the Aberration. However, you'll see why I don't do that in a minute. Repositioning of dogs going on here. The enemy Teraton comes over towards my objective, but can only reach this point. The picture's upside down for some reason. So there's my 4-point objective, and the enemy Teraton, I think, makes a bit of a mistake here, landing next to 2 Plague Swarms. The first one goes in. Even if I don't kill it immediately, he's probably not going to kill the Plague Swarm charging into it. And then the next Plague Swarm will come in with a buddy, and 2 Plague Swarms fighting a Teraton, who'll probably be wounded after the first round. It's not a good time. So at the end of the first round, I've racked up more points than my opponent. It is 8 points to 4, so it's a good start. And command dice, my opponent's got some move. I've got quite a bit of shooting, which is good for my suppression tactics. And we've got a bit of dog-on-dog war going on under here. Mine's wounded. So this is the objective that I'm defending with the Plague Swarms is down here. So this dog is obviously making a beeline for my forces, and the mortar and my general are down there as well, who are obviously worth some points and don't want to be distracted or murdered. So the Aberration still got designs on doing something about this. My HMG gets suppressed by the enemy HMG immediately, which is okay. And what's this? The Aberration is dead. Well, Plague Swarm decided to charge the Aberration and murdered it in one round by rolling a billion 8s, presumably. And that is not good for me at all. It's actually not looking good one little bit at this stage now. Lucky I've got the lead before that, because Aberration dying previously unwounded to a Plague Swarm is not on my list. Enemy Aberration keeps getting suppressed, so I've lost my Gribblies now. Lost my 2 big monsters. So I can't really hope that my Plague Swarms will do the same thing, just charging headlong into the enemy Aberration or the Plague Lord, and hope for the best. So I need to use them strategically now, because they're the best things I've got left, really. So I'm just going to keep suppressing. If I get the opportunity to charge a Plague Swarm into something that's suppressed, then that's a different matter. I can certainly go for that. My dogs team up and kill the enemy dog that was infiltrating my lines. And so the enemy Aberration came down, and as a result of that, it left as a gap up here. So with the help of some, by the way, those aren't enemy models there. Those are just zombies that are attached to the terrain. So it kind of looked like it throughout the game. I was thinking, wait a minute, I don't remember there being zombies there. And oh yeah, it's just them crawling out of an oozing pool in the terrain feature. So I have a zombie, and I was going to use a move dice for something else, but I thought, you know what, I could use a move dice to get the zombie onto the 4-point objective that's just been abandoned by the Aberration. I could kill the prone Aberration, try to attack it with a Plague Swarm right now, or That's a risky move. The safe move is to just put a zombie on the 4-point objective. So why wouldn't I do that? So 4 points scored for the zombie getting onto that objective. First objective score of the game, and that's going to give me a big boost there. So at the end of round 2, I'm not sure if there's a picture of it, but I gained another 7 points. So I'm up to 15 at this stage, and my opponent's up to 8. So it's very, very juicy at the moment, which means, because these are 4-point objectives, if I can hold one of them and kill a dog, then I'm going to win at the end of the turn. So I went into the third round with that objective in mind, because if it comes to just a slugfest now against a Plague Lord, who for some reason is there, and the Aberration against all my stuff, not going to go well probably, unless I get a really lucky roll with a Plague Swarm and manage to get something suppressed and roll a big 8 train. But chances are I'm just going to have to try and win on objective. So if I can score one of these in the next turn and kill that dog, then I'm going to win the game. That's all I have to think about. I don't think my opponent can feasibly win it in the next turn unless I do something really stupid. So that's the goal. Kill the dog, have one of these objectives. This dog is probably going to go and chase after the zombie. Oh yeah, there is a picture. So I've got a dog onto the objective there. This Plague Swarm is suppressed. So I drop down at the ghoul that jumps down there and tries to shoot it. But anyway, I've got it suppressed. And dog on the objective there. Plague Swarm and the Aberration do get into a fight, as we saw. Because it was suppressed, the Plague Swarm charged in there, didn't kill it, did wound it though, which is going to make it more difficult for it to kill me in retaliation, which is always nice. And then they're just slugging away at each other. Plague Lord, kind of stuck, not much he can get to. My opponent had lost quite a few models at this point, wasn't able to reroll the command dice, so couldn't get the move dice that you want with the Plague Lord. My HMG has not been under threat since he gunned down the enemy HMG. You can see that that zombie did actually get killed by something. It may have been a dog. But I did kill a dog, it was probably that one, and then got my dog onto the objective. And looking pretty healthy right about now, which means that I did get the 5 points I needed to reach 20 and win the game. My opponent got to 12, scoring steadily throughout. If you score 4 points a turn, that's not too woeful. But the fact that I'd built up that lead in the first 2 turns meant that I could calculate exactly what I needed in the last round, which was just a dog and an objective. So I was able to accomplish that, and as a result, there's a medal in it for me. So, second place at Ringworld 5, the Deadzone tournament, not to be sniffed at whatsoever. And the mistake that I made in game 1, which ended up costing me the win and turning it into a draw by forgetting there was a dog behind the stairs, when I looked at the leaderboard at the end, it made no difference whatsoever. So even if I'd won that game, I would have still been in the same position at the end. So I can feel better about that blunder. And that's that. 3rd edition Deadzone back up and running on the tournament scene. Hope to see more Deadzone events soon. Not only that, but also hopefully Dreadball will be back on the menu soon enough. That would be nice, so the Z's can come out of retirement and kick some butt, or more accurately just block up the score zones and then score a point here and there if they're lucky. But Deadzone is a good game. I don't play it as much as I do Kings of War, so I've never felt justified in painting a zillion factions for it like I do with Kings of War. I just don't play it that much. It's one of those games, I don't practice it a lot, but I still seem to do quite well at tournaments with it. Really weird phenomenon. I have won a Deadzone tournament in the past. I think I got 3rd in I think it was at WAFCON, so that was technically the UK National Championships, I think. I got 3rd in that a few years ago. Nice 2nd place medal here. So it's just one of those games. There are certain games where you don't need to practice them that much, you just get a knack for them. They're not overly complicated games anyway. And then once you've got the basics, you know what kind of list you like, you know how it works, you know how it plays, you know what all your models do. They haven't changed drastically between editions. I can still do pretty much the same thing with my army. And it all still works the same way. Never felt that great about taking the Plague Lord. Yeah, I think he's just too expensive and slow. And the extra command dice that he generates for you, he uses up just to move like a normal model. So I'd never feel justified in taking him. He's just so cool, though, that you're always tempted. I don't get that much value out of the general, to be honest. He's just the cheapest. I didn't actually use him to resurrect any enemy models as zombies at all during this event. So all he was doing was just being my leader and then trying not to die, or all she was doing, should I say. I was using the resin or resin plastic Dr. Simmons model, my general. She was just hiding the whole time. Didn't really accomplish anything, but wasn't costing me as many points as a Plague Lord would have done. And if the Plague Lord doesn't reach the enemy, which is not a guarantee because it's so slow, and obviously a really obvious thing to avoid for your opponent, I don't know. I struggle to justify taking him. The Aberration does a decent job usually. You get unlucky with it though. It is prone to bad luck with the Rampage ability. So anytime you're taking models with that, anything you can do to mitigate it is nice. There are ways of doing that within the rules, but I didn't take any of the Rampage models. The Leapers, I think, actually got a bit of a boost in this edition, but I haven't taken those. I've got a few of the models, though, so I can test out other plague lists. The Murder Birds don't do what I liked them to do before. They're more of a harassment unit now, rather than just getting in there turn one, murdering a sniper, and then holding up the rest of the enemy force, which probably they should never have been doing in the first place, to be honest. I don't think they justify their points when I compare them to the Teraton and the Plague Swarm at the moment. So I think maybe they've gone too far in nerfing the Murder Birds. I think they need a little bit of a tweak still, my personal opinion, but then maybe I need to try them out more in this new era. So, like the video if you haven't already. Let me know if you want to see more sweet, sweet, delicious, juicy, succulent, tender, moist Deadzone action on this channel, and I can try and provide some succulent battle reports. There haven't been too many videos seeping out of this channel lately. That's because I recently moved house, and I've still been moving furniture over here while also working a new job at the same time, so it's been quite hectic. The usual output on this channel obviously includes the Andy and Rem show, and Rem has been busy for the last 2 weeks with some very important projects of his. So we are going to be back this week on Tuesday night. So if you're in any way a fan of Warhammer or Age of Sigmar or fantasy gaming in general, it's worth checking that bad boy out. It's going to be a sweet, sweet show this week, no doubt. What else is coming up? There's a Kings of War tournament in about 3 weeks, and I still haven't decided what army I'm taking to it yet. And I should probably decide soon, because I have to actually make a special model for the event. So obviously I have to know how to paint it and to theme it with the army. I have to decide pretty damn quick whether I'm going to take goblins or abyssal dwarves or other. I've got other options. I've got undead, got halflings, got what can technically be run as an ogre army, got the first few units of a Night Stalker army that isn't quite anywhere near ready yet. So juicy things coming up on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Again, like that video if you're some kind of fool that hasn't. And check out all the links in the description, including, but not limited to, all the juicy fundraising sources down there. If you want this channel to continue to be a beacon of light during these dark and turbulent times, don't forget to give me all your money, of course, because that's what you do. You like YouTube channels, you fling money at them to encourage them to make more content. And that was Ringworld 5, my first 3rd edition Deadzone tournament, the first Deadzone tournament at all for quite a while now because of the worldwide situation, which isn't too dissimilar from events in the Deadzone universe, it has to be said. And I believe all that remains to be said now is good night out there, whatever you are.